Going forth, Moses represents movement forward in consciousness. Excuse me. Moses moves us away from fear, negativity, doubt, greed, jealousy, condemnation, from anything that isn't for our highest good. Moses moves us to the promised land, which is our understanding of the I am that I am, that we are one with the divine mind that created us. Exodus 3.1, or chapter 3, verse 1, Moses now kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert, and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. Moses was deep in thought, or rather his consciousness was wandering. Moses had fled and had been in Midian for 40 years. What do we know about 40?
As long as it takes.
As long as it takes, that's right. Jethro means excellent, his superiority, his abundance. Midian means judgment, pleading. It is not spiritual, but opposed to the real spiritual truth. Horeb means state of high spiritual realization that we may attain by affirming the power and presence of one inner divine substance and nourishment. Solitude, as a meaning of Horeb, signifies that we may have to go into the solitude of the inner mind and lead our flock of thoughts to the back of the wilderness, where dwells the exalted one, the divine I am, whose kingdom is good judgment. This was the second period of Moses' life, and he spent it in the Midian desert. It was a period of mental reflection and inner growth, and a time of overcoming strife and contention. What does that mean for us? You and I know we just can't straighten others out to do what we want them to do. I guess we all, some people have been there. I know I've been there. Catherine Ponder says, this is a period for us to straighten out our own thoughts and feelings, and a time to discipline our own personal will. We know in previous chapters that Moses fled to Midian to avoid being killed by Pharaoh after he killed an Egyptian. Moses is 80 years old, and God has not told him what work he wants for him to do. But he was preparing him to lead his people out of Egypt. Can you imagine all of us here, or all of us are here to do God's work? Do you believe that?
Yes.
That's good. Yes? Yes? Okay. Think about others who have come before us. Harriet Tubman, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Those that were born in this month. First Lady Michelle Obama, Susan Taylor, Etta James, Oprah, Alvin Ailey, and John Singleton. What about scientists and inventors like George Washington Carver, Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Dr. Charles Drew, just to name a few? Florence Scovel Shinn says, we can only be a success in a line which interests us greatly. Great inventors are never bored with their work, or they would not bring forth great inventions. Never force a child to do something he does not want to be. He would only prove a failure. Sometimes we go forth in some job or duty that is not what we want to do, and there is something much greater for us. But we may lack the initiative or think we cannot do it. Moses made an excuse for not going back to Egypt and doing what God wanted. He went on making excuses. But God had an answer for every one of his excuses. He told him his brother Aaron could go with him and do all the talking for him. Take your stick with you, God says. You will use it to do wonderful things that will prove to my people and to the king of Egypt that I am the true God, more powerful than the king and the gods that he worships. Exodus verses 2 and 3 says, and the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses says, now I will turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. Metaphysically, our angels are our spiritual perceptive faculties. This angel symbolizes a messenger. It is the projection into the consciousness of a spiritual ideal direct from God. Catherine Ponder says the burning bush symbolized our intuition. And we were talking about intuition last week. That small voice of wisdom. Once your intuition nature comes alive, it is like that burning bush that cannot be consumed or put out. It is there to offer you guidance and wisdom again and again. When we arrived at our foresighted or balanced state of mind, the light of intuition or flame of fire burns in our heart, yet it is not consumed. There is no loss of substance. Medically speaking, when we think, there is a vibratory process in the brain that uses up nerve tissue. But in the wisdom that comes from the heart, the bush tissue is not consumed. This thinking and wisdom is the holy ground or substance in its spiritual wholeness. This is the ideal of substance in divine mind. So how do we become connected to this divine mind? Anyone knows? Prayer, meditation, stillness.
Simply by being.
Simply by being. That sounds good. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see God, God called him out of the bush and said, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here am I." Finally, Moses was ready and God appeared. This was his second period of 40 years. And again, we know what 40 means. 40 means as long as it takes. So Moses was on his second period. He was ready for change. Some would say, where has God when I needed him? But God has always been in our midst. We are always standing in the presence of God, but we choose to ignore God, ignore spirit, ignore the inner depths of our souls. God calls us again and again and again, but he doesn't get tired. But we have to be in the right state of consciousness to hear God and respond. When we are prayed up and have meditated and are centered, do we realize this simple observation? Cecilia and I like to say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Florence Chauvel-Sin tells us, "I thought that was a wonderful ideal. Start out by being glad you are yourself. Then you can expand rapidly into the divine plan of your life, where you fulfill your destiny. You may be sure that the divine plan for your life will give you perfect satisfaction. You will no longer envy anyone. People often become impatient and discouraged." Wendy Craig Purcell says that knowing about God is theology, but knowing God is spirituality. Knowing and understanding God as divine law, Moses is ready to deliver his people from their adversaries. Exodus 3, verse 5 and 6 says, "And he said, draw not hither. Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thy standest is holy ground. Moreover, he says, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God." Metaphysically, shoes represents the words with understanding is clothed. You cannot approach holy ground or substance in our limited thoughts. Feet, that phrase of our understanding comes into contact with substance. Consequently, we can take possession of all substance that we comprehend and understand in the name of I am. The feet are the most willing and patient servants of the body. They go all day at the bidding of the mind, and upon them rest the burdens of thought and materiality. The more we believe in matter, the greater the burden laid upon the feet, the more tired they become. I was on a project in Detroit, and we were committed to processing 400 records per month. And we were into our second month, and somehow it wasn't getting done. I knew we were getting the amount of records through our process, but I just couldn't figure out how to accurately account for each record. I had to basically just meditate on that and just leave it in God's hands. I literally went home one night and I got down on my knees and prayed. And to this day, I couldn't tell you exactly what I prayed for, but I just knew that I had to figure out a way to get this done. And literally the next day when I woke up and I got to job, there was an aha moment. Just standing there, all of a sudden it just came to me how this worked. Exodus 3, 7 through 10, I'm going to skip to chapter 8 and 10. And now I come to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out of that land unto a good land and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivitites, and the Jebusites. Come now, therefore, I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Metaphysically, the Canaanites are basic and important life forces in the subconsciousness, like the Perizzites, but on a personal gain and advancement. Selfish. They separated themselves by living in the hill country. Separated by spiritual association, does not have the benefit of divine wisdom. The Hittites represents thoughts of opposition and resistance. The Amorites are erroneous thoughts and desires. The Hivites means animation, wickedness, physical existence, who thought belonged to carnal consciousness in man. The Jebusite signifies a thought belonging to the state of consciousness that is symbolized by Jebus, meaning contention and trial, not of peace or spirituality. It seems like these groups prefer to not be spiritual. Israel means contending for God, striving for God, who prevails with God. Moses and Pharaoh represent two forces at work in the consciousness, especially that part pertaining to the body. Moses represents the evolutionary force of new ideals that have grown in the subconscious mind, that are tugging at the old states of limitation and material, ignorance, and trying to raise into a higher life expression. Pharaoh represents the force that rules the body under the material regime. The Lord, Jehovah, is here as the universal law, the impulse of which is always upward and onward, yet seeking always to preserve equilibrium. When you affirm the spirituality of the body and yearn for release from bondage of materiality, you are making demands on Pharaoh. Then, in fear, he will at once lose his hold upon life. He hardens his heart, and sometimes the Lord, or Jehovah, the universal law of equilibrium, hardens it for him. Then it seems a failure to attain that which you have tried to demonstrate. But a step has been taken in the all-round evolution of the body, and you will find that you are gradually becoming both stronger physically and spiritually. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you probably prayed about it, and it seems like things were getting tighter and tougher. I recently had a period where I worked for this job for about 4 years, and I swear it was the hardest place that I've been, and it seemed like the more I prayed, the harder it got. But I think it was almost like it was a process, almost like being put in the fire and just made to harden myself. Because in the end, I could look back, and I think I grew through that. I think I became much stronger. Charles Fillmore says people's fears bring them to the point of a resistant state of mind, which they express in word and facts. They may have some belief in the power of evil. Fear throws dust in our eyes and hides the mighty spiritual forces that are always with us. Blessed are those who deny ignorance and fear and affirm the presence and power of spirit. To overcome fear, Fear is cast out by perfect love. To know divine love is to be selflessness, and to be selfless is to be without fear. The God-conscious person is filled with quietness and confidence. Exodus 14 and 15, God says unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. And God said moreover unto Moses, thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. Metaphysically, Moses says that Jehovah told him that his name means, I am that I am. Hebrew student says the original word is Jehovah, which means the ever-living male and female principle. Lee's Hebrew lexicon identifies this name with Christ as the manifestation of God that speaks to patriarchs and prophets. Jesus confirms this in Matthew 22, 42 through 45, where he reveals that the Christ existed before David, whose son he was supposed to be. In the Old Testament, the spiritual I am is symbolically described as Jehovah. In the New Testament, it is called Christ. Godfrey King writes, when Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life, he gave forth one of the mighty utterances that can be well expressed. When he says, I am, he did not refer to the outer expression, but he did refer to the mighty master presence, God within, because he repeatedly said, I of myself can do nothing. It is the Father within, the I am, that doeth the works. When you say and feel I am, you release the spring of eternal, everlasting life to flow on its way. In other words, you open wide the door to natural flow. When you say I am not, you shut the door in the face of the mighty energy. I am is the full activity of God. The I am is God's name in man or woman. It is Jehovah, the indwelling Christ, the true spiritual man or woman whom God made in his image and likeness. We want to reconnect with the mother, father, God that created us. Catherine Ponder tells us the term I am was one that was well known to the ancient people. They regarded it as a term of great power. Moses had been familiar from childhood with the power found in the words, I am, because those words appeared on the walls of every Egyptian temple. Every time you say, I am not, I cannot, I have not, you, whether knowingly or unknowingly, throttle the great presence within you. I am sick, I am poor, or I cannot, or I have not. You are closing and not allowing the God in you to perform its function and limits its energy. You give power to the outer conditions, persons, places, and things in the name of God. Every time you find yourself starting to say, I am sick, I am broke, I am not feeling well, reverse this by affirming, I am, and accompany that with something positive. I am well, I am healing, I am prosperous, or I am that I am. We cannot serve two masters. Do we know why? First, because there was only one intelligence, one presence, one power that can act. And that is the presence of God acting in you. When you turn to the outer manifestation and give all kinds of expressions and appearances power, you are attempting to serve a false, usurping master, because the outer expression can only find an appearance through the use of God's mighty energy, which is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt unto the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and unto a land flowing with milk and honey. And they should hearken unto thy voice, and thou shalt come, and the elders of Israel unto the king of Egypt. And you shall say unto them, the Lord God of Hebrews hath met with us, and now let us go. We beseech thee, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. And I am sure the king of Egypt will not let you go. No, not by a mighty hand. And I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders, which I will do in the midst thereof. And after that, he will let you go. 21 and 22, I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall come to pass that when we go, you shall not go empty. But every woman shall borrow of her neighbor, of her sojourneth in her house, jewels of silver, jewels of gold, and raiment. And you shall put upon your sons and upon your daughters, and you shall spoil the Egyptians. Metaphysically, we see the possibilities of man, the goodness of that promised land to which we can raise our thought. But Moses was very meek. We feel our inability and say, who am I that I should go into Pharaoh, that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? We have the assurance of God's power with us. Certainly I will be with thee. It is in this recognition of power and presence of God that all our strength and ability lie. Jesus said, I speak not from myself, but the Father abiding in me doeth the works. I am the resurrection and life. Our good is already being prepared by God. If we stay the course, we will reap the true benefit of spirit, which is not in the material, but in the spiritual completeness of our oneness with infinite power of God. A God that knows what we have need of before we even ask. There is no end to God's good when we are in the right consciousness to receive it. We will never hunger. God will feed us the substance of heaven, spiritual food to nourish us and give us strength. I am the resurrection and the life. How is your relationship with God? Okay. Robert Courier says, we are one with the great I am of the universe. We are a part of God until you realize that in the power it gives you, you will never know God. We are parts of one stupendous whole whose body nature is and God the soul. God seeks expression. Give God work to do through you. Give God a chance to express himself in some useful way. And there is nothing your powers cannot do to attain it. I recently went to a jazz outing and saw Wynton Marsalis playing his trumpet. There was a point that I saw God, or at least God in him, playing that trumpet. He was blowing it. It was beautiful. Be mindful that this is a metaphysical study of the Bible, not a historical or sociological discourse on it. We can spend hours talking about the politics, but we are uplifting the message of spirit, which is far bigger and more important than the man-made disputes. Of course, there will be exceptions, but this is where we are coming from. We are not just reading the Bible, we are studying its spiritual symbolism, its practical lessons, and its metaphysical meaning. And so it is, and so be it.